Imagine walking into a bank. You are totally bankrupt.
Like completely in the red.
Right. Your financial history is a disaster. Your credit score is literally zero, and you've burned every bridge you have. So you hand the teller your disastrous ledger, fully expecting them to call security.
You're just waiting for the handcuffs.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But instead, they look at your mountain of debt, hit a few buttons, and say, well, great, your debt is wiped out. Oh, and here's $1 billion you didn't earn. Have a nice day.
Wow. I mean, in our modern society, that scenario is absolute insanity.
It really is. Our whole world, our entire economic and social structure, it's built on a very ruthless equation, you know? Your status is the direct result of your actions. You earn what you get.
Yeah, it is the anxiety of merit. We are just deeply conditioned to believe that if we input the right amount of effort, we will output a secure place in the world. It's a defense mechanism, really. It gives us the illusion of control.
But what happens if you step inside a small church in Louisville, Kentucky, where that entire merit-based equation is just like taken out to the alley and dismantled?
That is exactly what we are getting into today.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are opening a fascinating stack of sources from Faith Lutheran Church. We've got their doctrinal statements, their website, and a full audio recording of a Sunday sermon from June of 2026.
It's a really rich stack of material.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
And our mission here is to unpack a theology that might completely invert how you view morality, status, and, well, what it actually means to be a good person.
Right. So to set the scene a bit, this congregation is part of the LCMS, the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. And if you read their website, you immediately hit this wall of very specific identity markers.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
They summarize themselves with this one phrase: Orthodox, not Eastern; Catholic, not Roman.
I saw that phrase, and my brain immediately tied itself in knots. Like, how can you be Orthodox but not Eastern Orthodox, and Catholic but not Roman Catholic? To an outsider, that just sounds like contradictory jargon.
It does, yeah. But it's actually a brilliant piece of historical shorthand. They are using those words in their ancient original senses.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so when they say Orthodox with a lowercase o, they mean they are committed to, quote, right teaching and historical scripture, but they aren't part of the Eastern Greek Church.
Ah, I get it.
And when they say Catholic with a lowercase c, they just mean universal, so part of the historic worldwide Christian faith, without submitting to the Pope in Rome. They are claiming a direct, unbroken line to the ancient church.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if they are that deeply rooted in ancient tradition, you would expect them to be incredibly rigid about, earning your keep.
Right, exactly.
But the engine driving all of this, the theme connecting every single source we have today, is a theological concept known as alien righteousness and forensic justification.
Yes.
And I was looking at this term, forensic justification, and I mean, it sounds like a CSI episode to me.
It really does sound like a procedural drama.
But reading through their doctrinal statements, it actually looks more like a literal courtroom scene. Am I reading that right?
You are, yeah. In their sources, they actually quote Martin Luther saying, "This is the doctrine on which the church stands or falls."
Wow, so no pressure.
Right.
Yeah.
Forensic justification is essentially a legal declaration by God, acting as the ultimate judge. And it happens in two distinct phases.
Okay, two phases.
Yeah, the first phase is something most people familiar with Christianity have probably heard, which is you are declared not guilty. God looks at your failures and says, the penalty is paid because of Christ's substitutionary death on the cross.
So the slate is wiped clean. You are basically back to zero.
Exactly. But zero isn't enough to get you into heaven.
Wait, really?
Yeah, that is where the second half of the declaration comes in. And this is what makes their theology so radical. God doesn't just declare you not guilty. He legally declares you perfectly worthy. And this has absolutely nothing to do with your own behavior. It is based entirely on Christ's active obedience. Like every perfect thought, word, and deed from Christ's life is credited directly to your account.
Oh, wow. Their website actually uses a really stark analogy for this. They say, imagine you are in school and you earn an absolute F on your report card.
A total failure.
Right. But Christ, on the other hand, earns a perfect A. Under this theology, God takes your F, hands it to Christ on the cross, and Christ pays the penalty. But then God takes Christ's A and writes your name at the top of the report card.
Yeah, and that is exactly why it is called an alien righteousness. It is a righteousness that is completely foreign to your own nature.
Because it's not yours.
Right. It belongs to an alien source, someone else entirely, but it is legally permanently given to you.
It's less like winning the spiritual lottery and more like having diplomatic immunity.
That's a great way to put it.
Like, you might commit the crime, but because you are wearing the ambassador's badge, a badge you didn't earn and you definitely don't deserve, the local police legally cannot touch you. The badge's authority completely overrides your actions. But reading that, a massive red flag goes up for me. I mean, if I'm sitting in the pews and I suddenly realize I have spiritual diplomatic immunity, my very first thought is, great, I don't have to be a good person anymore.
Right. It feels like a license to do whatever you want.
Yeah. So if your spiritual bank account is completely full based on someone else's work, what does that actually look like when taught to a congregation? How does a pastor teach this without risking sheer moral chaos?
Well, that tension is exactly what Vicar Samuel Bennett tackles in the audio source we have. This is his sermon from June 2026.
Okay.
He takes this precise lens of alien righteousness and applies it to Luke 15. Now, most people know it as the parable of the prodigal son, but Vicar Bennett intentionally retitles it the parable of the two sons.
Well, because the older brother's reaction is just as dangerous as the younger brother's rebellion.
Precisely. And Vicar Bennett spends a lot of time establishing the historical stakes here. Jesus is telling this story at a dinner party with tax collectors, and the Pharisees, the religious elite of the time, are just furious.
Because, I mean, we hear tax collector today, and we just think of an annoying government auditor, right?
Yeah, the IRS.
But in the first century, it was a profound betrayal. The sermon points out that their income relied on coercing extra money from their fellow Jews. It was legally protected extortion by an occupying empire.
Right. They had essentially sold out their own neighbors, trading our identity for sheer personal gain. The Pharisees considered them worse than Gentiles. They were viewed as traitors, barely human.
Wow.
So when Jesus sits down to share a meal with them, the Pharisees interpret this as Jesus actively endorsing heinous sin. Jesus tells this parable to explain exactly how this diplomatic immunity actually works in practice.
And he starts with the younger son who represents these tax collectors. And the vicar, I mean, he does not pull any punches here. The younger son's actions are grotesque.
Truly awful.
He asks for his inheritance early, which is the cultural equivalent of looking his father in the eye and saying, I wish you were dead. You are worth more to me as a corpse than a living father.
It's brutal.
And then he takes the money, squanders it on reckless living, and ends up literally starving feeding pigs.
Mm-hmm.
He falls so low that the pigs are eating better than he is.
He has completely bankrupted himself, morally, socially, and financially. He has undeniably earned the F on the report card.
But wait, here's where I was reading the transcript of the sermon and I just had to stop.
Mm-hmm.
Because when the younger son finally decides to go home, his plan isn't even a genuine apology.
No, not at all.
You can actually hear Vicar Bennett's background in psychology coming through here. He diagnoses the younger son's motivations and realizes the kid isn't sorry in the slightest.
It is purely a survival tactic.
He just wants a sandwich.
Yeah.
I mean, the sermon explicitly points out that he doesn't ask for reconciliation. He doesn't ask to be his son again. He doesn't suddenly realize he loves his father.
Right. He's just hungry.
He is just calculating that the hired hands at his dad's house have bread and he doesn't want to starve. He is actively trying to con his dad a second time.
Yes.
So if he's not even genuinely repentant, how on earth does he ever get restored? How does he get the A on the report card?
What's fascinating here is that the restoration has nothing to do with the younger son's actions. The spotlight entirely shifts away from the broken son and onto the scandalous behavior of the father.
Okay, scandalous how?
Well, the father sees him coming from a long way off. And what does he do? He runs. Now, in an ancient Middle Eastern culture, patriarchal, great men simply do not run.
Really? Why not?
Because running requires you to pull up your robes, it exposes your legs, it is inherently undignified and shameful.
Oh, wow. So he publicly humiliates himself.
Exactly. He does it to save his son. The sermon explains that the father knows if the village gets to this boy first, they will stone him for what he did to their community.
Oh, right, because of the betrayal.
So the father chooses to sprint through the town, intercepting the son, throwing his arms around him, and thereby absorbing the shame. He saves the son from the execution he absolutely deserved.
That's incredible.
And before the son can even get through his fake rehearsed apology, the father orders the servants to bring the best robe, a ring, and sandals. These are markers of full sonship. The father takes the F and gives the son the A.
Which brings us to the older brother. He represents the Pharisees, the people who did everything right. And Pastor John Stebbins, who has a background in filmmaking, clearly influences the way this church stages the drama of this text.
Oh, definitely.
Because the younger brother sins through active rebellion, but the older brother's sin is entirely passive. It's a sin of inaction.
Right. As the oldest son, it was his societal duty to reconcile his family. He should have been the one hunting down his younger brother. Instead, he coldly stands by and watches his family tear itself apart.
It's like an older sibling who gets straight A's and never breaks curfew, but coldly watches their family fall apart and refuses to lift a finger to help. If you are listening to this right now and you are the person who does everything perfectly at work, you never miss a deadline, you do all the extra credit, but you get secretly thrilled when a struggling coworker fails, or you refuse to help them because it might mess up your perfect reputation. Well,
Yeah.
the sermon is essentially saying you are the older brother.
And he compounds that sin by refusing to attend the feast. By skipping the banquet, he publicly insults his father. But the most revealing part is his argument.
Right.
He tells his father, "Look, these many years I have served you, and I never disobeyed your command, yet you never gave me a young goat." He defines the relationship entirely as a master and an employee.
He views his own father as a boss withholding a paycheck. Both of these sons totally misunderstood what it meant to be part of the family. The younger one wanted to be a hired hand just to get food, and the older one wanted to be a servant to earn a reward.
Right, both of them were relying on their own resumes. The younger one's resume was garbage, and he knew it. The older one's resume looked flawless on paper, but it made him arrogant and cruel.
Okay, so we have the theology, but Vicar Bonnet has to bridge the gap from ancient text to Tuesday morning reality. So what does this all mean for the listener sitting in the pews? If both sons are wrong, and only the father who represents Christ is right, how are they supposed to live when they leave church?
Well, he tells the congregation that because Christ shamed himself to secure your status, just like the Father ran to save the Son, your standing before God is totally secure.
You already have the robe.
You already have the ring. Therefore, you do not have to worry about what other people think. You don't have to be afraid of failing. In fact, he explicitly tells the congregation to go and fail boldly.
Fail boldly, which is, a complete subversion of our modern corporate culture. We live in a world terrified of failure, obsessed with building our personal resumes and guarding our status.
It really is countercultural.
It's fascinating because Pastor Stebbins, with his film background, and Vicar Bonnet, who studied psychology and history, they seem to deeply understand the human condition. That all our societal striving is just the older brother trying to earn his place.
Yeah, exactly.
But I have to push back here. In theory, that sounds beautiful. But human nature usually takes the path of least resistance. If Vicar Bonnet tells a room full of people, "Hey, your status is perfect, fail boldly," doesn't this message of, "Your status is already perfect, just make people lazy"?
You'd think so, but it actually forces a shift in motivation. If you believe your eternal status is already secured, the anxiety of self-preservation just evaporates. The sermon instructs the listener to look at their earthly life, their time, their energy, their wealth. Someday, all of those resources will run out. But because you aren't desperately trying to hoard merit to save yourself, you are completely free to spend all your earthly capital on your neighbors.
Oh, so it shifts the focus outward. You don't do good works to impress God. You do them because your neighbor actually needs them.
Exactly. You strive to become the most skilled, effective person you can be, whether that means being the best husband, the best wife, the best worker, or using your single years to prepare for marriage. Not to exalt yourself, but to serve others. You can take massive risks for the sake of your community, fail boldly, and know that your core identity remains entirely untouched.
Wow. Okay, so they have this radically free theology for how they operate out in the world, but how do they reinforce it? On one hand, the sermon preaches an entirely free, unearned alien righteousness where God runs to the worst of sinners, but they must have a way to keep people grounded in this reality.
They do, and this brings our deep dive full circle back to the identity of Faith Lutheran Church itself and how they physically act out this theology every single Sunday.
Okay, lay it on me.
So on their website, they describe their worship spaces, not of the world, transcendent, cosmic. They celebrate the Holy Eucharist Communion every Sunday, and they believe in the real presence.
Real presence, meaning what exactly?
Meaning this is not just a memorial meal. They believe the bread and wine are the actual physical body and blood of Christ.
Okay, so they are very clear that while it carries symbolic meaning, a literal miracle is happening on the altar.
Yes. And the mechanism of how they view this is fascinating. When you take communion there, you aren't just having a private, individual moment of reflection. They believe the veil between heaven and earth becomes translucent.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you're communing with the invisible church. Time and space fold, and you're kneeling at the altar alongside Adam and Eve, Abraham and Sarah, Peter, Paul, Martin Luther, and your own glorified loved ones who have passed away.
That is a massive cosmic drama. But here is where we find a really sharp tension in their sources. Because like I said, you have this free grace theology, but when it comes to that communion table, they have incredibly strict boundaries.
They do. They practice what is called closed communion.
Right.
They do not allow just anyone to walk in off the street and take the Eucharist. They restrict the altar to those who are members of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod or those who have been examined and share their exact doctrinal confession.
See, to a modern listener, that sounds incredibly contradictory. You just preached free grace for the broken, so why are you closing the table? Is this just religious elitism?
From their perspective, it is the exact opposite. They explain their logic by citing the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians 11.
Okay, what does that say?
They believe that because the actual physical body and blood of Christ are present, consuming it while actively rejecting the church's teachings creates a devastating spiritual short circuit. Taking communion is a public declaration that you agree with everything taught at that altar.
Ah, I see. So allowing someone who fundamentally disagrees with their theology to commune would be forcing that person to engage in a spiritual lie.
Yes. They view closed communion not as an act of exclusion, but as an act of protective triage. They state they practice it out of love to protect the uncatechized from bringing spiritual judgment or harm upon themselves.
And whether you agree with the mechanics of that theology or not, it perfectly encapsulates who they are as a congregation. They are highly orthodox, deeply structured, and fiercely protective of their doctrine inside the worship space. But armed with that diplomatic immunity of alien righteousness, they are commanded to go out into the chaos of the world radically free, unburdened by the fear of failure, to pour themselves out for their neighbors.
It is a remarkable synthesis. High church, cosmic liturgy anchoring gritty, everyday freedom.
So let's recap the journey we've taken today. We started with a report card, the concept of forensic justification, where God takes your failing grade, pays the penalty, and gives you Christ's perfect A. We saw how that plays out in the parable of the two sons, where a humiliated father sprints to save a con artist's younger son, while the older son stews in his own self-righteous merit. We explored how that alien righteousness rewires human psychology, freeing the congregation to fail boldly. And finally, we saw how that grace is physically consumed in a transcendent, carefully guarded Sunday liturgy.
And the core value for you as the listener in examining these sources today isn't necessarily about adopting a specific denomination's practices. It's about challenging the fundamental way you view your own worth.
Exactly.
If you can understand how viewing your status as entirely secured by an alien source shifts a person away from self-preservation and toward genuine service, you start to see the cracks in our own merit-obsessed culture.
Which leaves me with one final thought for you to ponder. If our entire modern society, from our grading rubrics in elementary school to our corporate ladders, is built on the suffocating anxiety of the older brother, constantly working to prove our worth and desperately trying to earn our place at the table, what would happen to our culture tomorrow if everyone suddenly believed their resume was already perfect?
It's a huge question.
It is. Would we stop working entirely, or would we finally be free to do our absolute best work, simply because we aren't afraid to fail? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.